any other experience as a first responder?
I started my career in Bedford Township in 1998 until 2000.
So also, how long have you been a first responder?
Approximately 26 years.
You indicated that you are a paramedic.
Yes, sir.
How long have you been a paramedic?
Approximately 23 years.
And were you employed as a firefighter and a paramedic on April 20th, 2024?
Yes, sir.
How were you assigned on that day?
I was the shift commander in charge of the day's operations.
What, I guess for those of us that are in the industry, what does shift commander for day's operation actually mean?
I'm responsible for the emergent and non-emergent response to all calls for service within the township, outside of the township, as well as general supervision associated with personnel that are assigned to that unit.
As a supervisor, do you respond to all the calls, or is it sort of depend on the nature of the call?
Yes, sir. It depends on the nature of the call. The higher priority calls are typically the incidents that I would respond to.
And when you say higher priority, does that mean more serious?
Yes, sir. Serious in nature.
And were you dispatched to the Swan Boat Club on April 20th, 2024?
I was.
And do you recall what that dispatch was?
Yes, sir. Berlin Township Fire Department was dispatched to the Swan Boat Club on the report of a vehicle through the building with multiple persons injured on the ground as well as a possible child in traffic.
Is Swan Boat Club in your jurisdiction?
No, sir, it's not.
You were brought in as extra help?
Yes, sir, we were.
And when you received that dispatch, do you recall where you were?
Yes, sir. I was at Station 1, getting ready to pull out of the parking lot, perform some general errands for the day.
And how did you respond to that dispatch?
I responded to my department issued vehicle with my emergency license siren activated to the scene approximately 9 minutes.
Do you know about the time you arrived on scene?
I believe it would have been about 3:15.
Were there other first responders or law enforcement already there?
Yes, sir. I pulled in with Berlin Fire Department's first arriving unit as well as the sergeant from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
You were very early to the scene.
Yes, sir.
And can you please describe what you observed when you arrived at Swan Boat Club?
Once I parked my vehicle, I noticed the large hole in the side of the building. Numerous people on the exterior of the building looking for help, asking for help, as well as an individual being attended to on the right side of the building, the right side of the building.
Do you know who that would be?
That would have been St. Phil's.
And did you enter the boat club?
I did, sir.
How did you enter the boat club?
Through the opening that was created by the vehicle.
What did you see when you entered?
Equal amount of chaos on the inside. To my right were 3 individuals, 2 of them, 2 females sitting in a chair, 1 female lying on the floor.
Did you interact yourself with any of the injured victims?
No, sir. I was able to ascertain that they were conscious, alert, breathing, and not in need of immediate medical attention.
Is that because of your role as a supervisor?
Yes, sir. As a senior paramedic on scene and first arriving, my responsibilities typically would be to triage or categorize the nature of injuries associated with each victim and arrange for the transport of those victims as appropriate.
And so you were also involved in determining who went by ambulance or life flight if necessary?
Yes, sir. I was.
Do you recall if anybody was life flighted that day?
Yes, sir. I believe that would have been Shaden Phillips.
That is the son that survived. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And nobody else was transported by a life flight?
No, sir.
Is that because it was determined that there wasn't their injuries were not so severe that they needed that?
For the totality of the injuries, I believe we transported 7 total patients. 1 went by air ambulance, 2 air ambulances were requested at the scene through the initial aircraft, assisted in advanced life support procedures with Zane in the back of the Viking Crush County ambulance.
So you requested a second air, and as you call it air ambulance, I call it life or flight, I'll call it air ambulance, sorry. You requested a second, but that was ultimately not used?
Correct. crew was utilized, the aircraft was not.
Why was that not used?
Those individuals from that aircraft were tasked with assisting in the resuscitation efforts with Zane.
But he did not survive.
No, sir.
He had deceased on the scene.
Yes, sir.
Do you know, how many victims were transported by ambulance?
6 total by ground, 1 by air ambulance.
And do you know where those victims were sent, the ones that went? Do you know where the victim that was lifeline went? Where
Jake was transported by aircraft to University of Michigan Moss Children's Hospital.
And out of the, not the road ambulances, where were those victims transported to?
Ms. Dodds was transported by French County ambulance to Corwell Trenton. I believe Ms. Stiff was transported by Huron Valley ambulance crew to Corwell Trenton. And then I believe we had 2 additional patients, Ms. Rath and Richards, were transported by a Rockwood ambulance to Wyandotte Hospital. And Mr. Smothers was transported by a Monroe Community ambulance to Detroit Children's Hospital.
Were some victims able to transport themselves?
That is my understanding.
So you wouldn't have been involved in that? They would have gotten a ride or driven themselves?
That's correct, sir.
So you referenced where you saw people injured in there. Do you know specifically where Leah Stiff was located initially?
I believe Ms. Stiff was at the base of the bar, almost to the end on the right side if you were facing the bar from the hole that had been created in the side of the building, laying on her back, being attended to by a male unit.
And what about Mr. Edward Smothers? Do you know where he was initially located?
I believe Mr. Smothers was in the breezeway, more or less in the center of the breezeway, sitting in an upright position. He had a obvious deformity to his right leg. He had some injuries to his face that were bleeding.
When you say obvious deformity, are you indicating what appears to be a broken?
Yes, sir.
Diane Medina, do you know where Ms. Medina was found?
I believe Ms. Medina was just to the left of Ms. Stiff, just to the rear of the vehicle.
So that would also be along the bar?
Yes, sir. Facing the bar.
And lastly, do you know where Jaden Phillips was located?
Jaden, is my understanding that he was thrown over the top of the bar and was located to the left, down below some of the debris.
Are you saying that Jaden was hit by the car and thrown actually over the bar, but was found underneath it? Or
That's
behind it?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Were you involved in providing aid to Zane Phillips?
No, sir. The only interaction I had with him was my initial assessment of him as I was entering the building. And then when I exited the building, I did stop and check for a pulse on Zane.
And at that point, did he still have a pulse?
He did, however, it was weak and threatened.
Do you know where Zane was originally located?
I'm not aware of where Zane originally was located.
Because he had already been extricated by
Yes,
the
sir.
convoy. And what about Alana Phillips? Do you know where she was located?
Ms. Phillips, when I was triaging Mr. Smothers and Ms. Dodds, it was made aware of me that Alana was somewhere in the vicinity of the vehicle. When I moved some of the debris, I was able to locate her at the corner of the door, just in front of the vehicle.
Were you able to remove her?
I was not.
Why is that?
Based on my training, education, and experience, I was able to determine that the injuries she had sustained were not compatible with life.
It was fatal.
Yes, sir.
Are you issued camera you wear daily?
No, sir.
No for the commission, Judge. Cross?
Please put the speech to.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next witness. Judge Pickleball Deputy Stephen Schmidt.
Do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this
Deputy, would you state your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Deputy Stephen Schmidt, STEVENSCHMIDT.
Thank you. Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Judge. Deputy, what do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office,
And how long have you worked for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office?
approximately 5 years.
Okay. Did you have any law enforcement jobs before that?
I did.
And what was that?
I worked for the Dundee Police Department for approximately 2.5 years.
Did you have any law enforcement jobs before that?
I did.
What was that?
I worked for the Riverview Police Department for just a short amount of time, approximately 9 months.
Okay, so you've been a law enforcement officer just over 8 years?
Around there.
Okay. And were you working for the Sheriff's Department on April 20?
That was.
And what was your assignment back then?
I was assigned to road patrol.
Okay. Since then, you've been promoted to a specialized division within the Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
So you're no longer a road patrol deputy?
No, I'm assigned to the Detective Bureau.
And currently, you have all the training, certification, and educations necessary to be a certified police officer in the state of Michigan?
I do.
And all those are up to date as of now?
Yes.
And they were up to date on April 20?
Yes, sir.
And what was your assignment on April 20?
I was assigned to road patrol, District 1, which would be North County.
Okay. And in road patrol, you respond to calls for service?
Yes. So many calls, we go.
Did you receive a call for service that brought you here to testify today?
Yeah.
And what was the nature of that call?
It was for a vehicular crash at the Monroe Club.
And did you respond?
I did.
What did you see when you arrived?
Upon arrival, it was pure chaos when I got there. There were people running around, injured people, people lying on the ground. One of my first observations was a large hole in the side of the boat club where a vehicle driven through it. Upon walking up, I saw a small child who he didn't appear to be breathing.
Where was he located?
In the grass just outside of the hole in the wall, inside of the boat club.
So as you're assessing the scene, what do you do to orient yourself?
Well, the first thing I try to do is just kind of find a place wherever I can help. That being with first aid as best as I could.
And where did you wind up within the overall scene?
So, Conservation Officer Ingersoll, he was in the breezeway area between the bar and almost like the foyer type area. He was asking for help. He was with a small child who had a significant leg injury.
Was there anybody else in the breezeway area when you went in?
There was a middle-aged female. She was sitting against the wall.
And what was her state?
She was in and out of consciousness from what I remember.
And so at least initially when you arrived on scene, you just tried to assist with first aid of the victims as you could see.
Yes,
Eventually, did you make contact with Sergeant Comey?
I did.
And what was his position on the scene in regards to the sheriff's office?
So he was the shift supervisor at the time.
So at the time, was he the commanding officer on scene, for lack of a better term?
Yes, he was the officer in charge.
Did he give you any direction?
He did. He advised me that he had the driver of the vehicle seated in the rear of his patrol vehicle. At that time, he asked me if I would start an investigation of the crash with the driver.
Did he give you any direction in what kind of investigation to perform?
Yes, there are some cues for a possible intoxicated driver, so that was the investigation that I conducted.
Okay. And so at this point, you've been a law enforcement officer for 8 years.
Correct.
All of them road patrol. Had you conducted an OWI investigation prior to that day? About how many?
Personally, somewhere in the range of about plus I've also trained other new deputies and new officers, and been part of their OWI operating while intoxicated investigations, as well as assisting other officers in the sheriff's office.
So do you receive specialized training specifically to OWI investigations at the police academy?
We do.
And as part of being a police officer, do you take updates to that training throughout the course of your employment?
Yes, we do.
And you did as being a police officer for those 8 years?
Yes, sir.
Did you receive any specialized training beyond the academy and those subsequent educations in the OWI investigation?
Yes, so I attended A-Ride training or Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving training in approximately August of 2022.
Okay, and if you could just explain to the jury briefly what that is outside of its name.
So it's just a more specialized training. They teach you some different techniques for sobrieties, besides the main three that are recognized by National Highway Traffic Safety Administration as being like the three primary SFSTs or sobriety tests.
Okay, so I know the term sobriety, SFST, sobriety test. Explain to the jury just a little bit what a sobriety test is, what its purpose is.
So a sobriety test is essentially a divided attention test. Somebody that's under the influence of alcohol or narcotics, they might not be able to focus on instructions, plus then at the same time being able to actually conduct the test.
So you use the term SFST or standardized field sobriety test.
Correct.
What are those in the state of Michigan?
So in the state of Michigan, there are three. The first being the horizontal gaze nystagmus, or what's an eye test. The second being, it's called one-leg stand. Essentially, you stand on either foot of shoes and you lift the other leg slightly off the ground with your hands at your sides, and you're asked to count numbers. The third being walk and turn. Walk and turn, essentially you walk a certain steps down, you take a small series of steps and turn yourself around, and then you walk back to the starting point.
And those are the standardized field sobriety tests in Michigan
Correct.
that all officers are trained on.
Correct.
Specifically as to the eye test, the horizontal gaze nystagmus, what are you taught to look for on that test?
So you're taught to look for what's called nystagmus, or an involuntary jerk of your pupils. Somebody who is under the influence, it will tend to, somebody that's sober, your eyes will roll smoothly across your head. Somebody who's under the influence, when they're focusing on the cue, which a pen or the tip of your finger, you'll actually see that their pupils actually jerk from side to side, which shows impairment.
When conducting these tests, you're not just looking at the results of the test, are you?
No.
What else are you looking at?
You're looking for other cues for intoxication, whether it's bloodshot, watery eyes, whether their inability to stand on their own or keep balance, if they're slurring their speech, their inability to follow simple directions, etc.
So with this training, you approach Sergeant Bogia's vehicle, is that right?
Correct.
What do you find when you get there?
Well, the defendant was seated in the rear of Sergeant Mobia's vehicle. So that's where I located her at, was in the rear of his patrol vehicle.
What did you do once you located her?
Once I located her, I began to talk to her, ask what her name is, ask if she's injured, just basic questions.
What are the things you're looking for just in asking the basic questions?
Well, immediately you're looking for signs of intoxication, whether they have, like I said, bloodshot, watery eyes, or they smell like do they smell like alcohol or intoxicants? Are their clothes disheveled? Have they vomited or urinated on themselves? Just basic signs like that.
So these visual basic signs that you look for in an OWI investigation, did you observe any of them in the defendant that day?
Yes.
Which ones?
So at that time, I could smell the odor of intoxicants coming from her, bloodshot, watery eyes, and then later on, inability to keep balance.
Okay. So you had a brief conversation with her as she's seated in the back of the patrol vehicle.
Correct.
And then at some point you make a determination you're going to attempt standardized field sobriety testing.
I do. I asked her if she'd be willing to consent to take some sobriety tests, and she agreed to do so.
Okay. And what did you do with the defendant then?
I had her exit the patrol vehicle. Upon exiting the patrol vehicle, she was having problems with balance. So she used my arm to kind of hold herself up while I walked her to the rear of the patrol vehicle. Before that, during our medical questionnaire, I was informed that she does have neuropathy in her hands and feet.
And what's your understanding of the result of that?
The understanding of neuropathy.
Yes.
I wouldn't object, he's not a medical professional, what's the foundation that he was looking at, I guess.
That's why I asked him what his understanding of it is. I'm not asking for an expert opinion, I'm asking with what his understanding of it is, how did that affect how he treated the defendant?
I think that makes sense. He's not giving an expert opinion. The objection is overruled.
And as far as what in my experience of somebody with neuropathy, it's obviously something that's neurological, numbing in their hands or feet or legs.
How does that impact the way you conduct your OWI investigation as it pertains to sobriety tests?
So I think immediately at that time, that took the one-night stand and the walk and turn kind of off the table for me. I didn't feel like she'd be in any condition to try to perform those tests at that time.
And that's because she had self-reported neuropathy and you had witnessed her exhibiting a lack of ability to balance.
Correct.
Even if someone hadn't reported a medical condition, with that lack of balance, how would you approach the standardized field sobriety test?
But in her condition that she was that day.
Yes, or just in general.
So always whenever I have conducted a OWI investigation, I think one of the most important things is to see if they're able to conduct any of the physical tests. If they're able to, no prior injuries or anything that would prohibit them from doing so, then I think that would be sufficient to complete those tests.
So if someone's experiencing a lack of balance, would you ask them to do the one-leg stand?
Most likely not.
Why not?
Their safety is paramount for me. I don't want them falling over or tripping on themselves or injuring themselves any further.
And what about the walk and turn?
The walk and turn is the same way. If somebody's having a hard time walking, I don't want to make them walk 8 steps down, take a turn, and then walk 8 steps back towards me. The last thing I want is for somebody to fall into traffic and injure themselves.
But that's not the case with the HGN, right? The horizontal gaze and status.
Correct.
Did you attempt to conduct that on the defendant?
I did.
And how did that work out?
I tried a few different times. The defendant was not able to focus on the stimulus, which was my finger, so I wasn't able to actually complete that test.
What do you mean she wasn't able to focus?
So when I held my finger up in front of her face, I was moving it back and forth, and she was failing to follow my finger. She was just staring directly at me.
So she wasn't, what do you tell someone with the stimulus when you're conducting an HGN?
I told them to follow with their eyes, and their eyes only don't move their head.
Okay. And was she able to follow with her eyes?
No.
Did she turn her head one way or the other to try to follow it?
At some point, she was trying to use her head to follow, but ultimately she was unable to complete the test.
You talk about things you look for in conducting sobriety tests. Her behavior in that test, is that in any way significant to you with your experience and training?
It could be, yes.
And how?
In prior experiences, I've had people that were impaired, they were unable to follow the stimulus while conducting that test. Just because you can't follow the stimulus or complete the test doesn't mean that that's not a sign of intoxication or impairment.
And that's part of following instructions too, is that correct?
Yes.
So you were only able to attempt one standardized field sobriety test. Are there any other sobriety tests you give in the event that somebody's unable to conduct the physical portions?
Yes. Typically, if somebody's unable to complete the physical portions, I'll go with a mental one, somebody that it's a test that they're able to do without doing anything physically.
Did you do so in this case?
I did.
And what test did you administer?
So I had the defendant recite the alphabet A to Z without singing.
Was she able to do that?
She was able to complete that test.
And did you do any other cognitive tests?
I did.
And what was that?
I did a number counting test. I gave her instructions. I asked her to start from 100 and count backwards to 88.
Was she able to effectuate that test?
She was not.
What were the results of that test?
Would I be able to refresh myself with
Yes.
results? So as far as the results of that test, she was able to count backwards from 100 back to 91, and then back up to 100, and then from there she skipped over 88, and then was counting in 70s and began counting descending in 70s from 78 to 72.
And the initial instruction was to count from backwards from 100 to 88, correct? At that point, did you do anything else in regards to a roadside OWI investigation?
No, that concluded the investigation.
What was, in your training and experience, what did you believe existed at that time?
Well, I believe that there was probable cause for impairment to make an arrest for operating while intoxicated at that time.
And what did you do with the defendant once you made that determination?
So I placed her in handcuffs, advised her she was under arrest, did handcuff her in front, because earlier she advised that she had a wrist injury from the crash. I didn't really want to handcuff her behind her back and strain herself or hurt herself any further, so I handcuffed her in front, and then she was placed in the rear of my patrol vehicle.
And that concluded your role in the OWI investigation at the scene.
At the scene, correct?
Did you remain on scene after that?
I did.
And what did you do?
At that time, I was just trying to do whatever I could to try to alleviate some of the duties from anybody that was there. Like I said before, it was a very chaotic situation. There were medical personnel running around everywhere, and I just wanted to make sure that, if anything was needed at that time, that I could be there and assist.
At some point, did you interact with Deputy Carino of the Sheriff's Department?
I did.
And what was the nature of that interaction?
So Deputy Farina wanted to do some further investigation of the whole incident with the defendant.
Deputy Carino wanted to continue the OWI investigation,
Correct.
and he did so,
Correct.
and you stood by while that happened.
I did.
And also during that time, you dealt with other folks at the scene,
I did.
witnesses, is that correct?
Yes.
And other police officers.
Yes.
At some point, were you told to leave the scene?
I was.
And who directed you to do that?
That would have been Sergeant Bowman.
And what instruction did he give you?
He asked me to take the defendant to the hospital so we can do the blood draw for the OWI investigation.
So just explain to the jury roughly, what does that mean?
So after somebody's placed under arrest for operating while intoxicated, there's a form that we have to read them. It's their chemical test. There's a DI 177, which is the state form, that's what it's named, and then DI 93. So the 177 is consent, so they give consent for chemical tests. DI 93 would be they don't give consent. On the back of the paperwork, there's instructions. I read her the instructions, asked her if she'd be willing to take a chemical test, which at that time would be a blood draw, and then she would be transported to the hospital to get that blood draw conducted.
And did you in fact transport her to the hospital?
I did.
At this time, were you aware that this crash had fatalities?
I was semi-aware, but not to the full extent.
Okay. By the time you got to the hospital, were you aware?
Yes.
Okay. Does the sheriff's office have a policy on chemical testing when there's a fatal crash?
Yes, it's in best judgment to make sure that instead of doing a breath test, a blood draw is done.
And what about as it pertains to a consent?
I believe with the consent blood draw at that time, it would have been best practice to complete a search warrant for the blood regardless.
All right. And did you do so?
I did.
And what's involved, Deputy, in completing a search warrant for a blood draw at the hospital?
So we have an online form that we essentially fill out. That's our,
Your Honor, I would object to being considered those are questions of law. The court decided regarding that.
I'm not proffering it for its legality. I'm proffering it to explain the time frame between the crash and the blood draw.
I think the objection is overruled. I think what he's telling us is just the basic procedure, and I think that is appropriate.
Your Honor, the procedure I totally respect, it should be any time concern. Thank you.
We won't. So you have an online form.
correct, we have an online form that's on our laptops. Fill all the form out. It's essentially everything I kind of just went over, what happened, the day, time, results of sobrieties, what sobrieties were conducted, and then after that, I have to contact whoever's the on-call prosecutor. They have to agree that there's enough probable cause there for the search warrant to be signed, and then I have to contact the on-call magistrate and have the actual search warrant signed and then sent back to me.
And April 20th, 2024 is a Saturday, is that correct?
Correct.
So you're dealing with all folks who are not at work.
Correct.
That's why you're using the term on-call, right?
Yes, sir. Everybody is not working during that time, so.
At least everybody who you would need for a search warrant.
Correct.
So any idea how long all that took, Deputy?
From the time of the crash to the time of the blood draw.
Well, just the time to prepare the search warrant and get it signed.
I don't know specifically, but it kind of is a time-consuming process.
Okay. And where do you typically in these types of situations do all that?
It's all done in the vehicle. I don't have access on any of the computers at the hospital to do anything like that, so it has to be done outside of the emergency room, the hospital.
Okay. Is it only upon your completion of those documents that you then enter the hospital?
Yes,
And is that what happened in this case?
yes,
So you go to the scene, you investigate, you leave with the defendant, drive to the hospital, complete your paperwork. At this point, you finally get into the physical hospital.
Correct.
You take the defendant in with you?
Yes.
And were there any other law enforcement officers there?
Deputy Flint was there with me as well.
At this point, when you enter the hospital with the defendant, is this the first interaction the hospital has with you and the defendant? Do they know you're coming?
I don't believe they knew I was coming at that time. I don't recall
So once you enter the hospital, what's the procedure once you arrive in these types of cases?
So the procedure, anytime we take somebody in the hospital, they need to be ran through registration to get them registered to the hospital. And then after that, then whoever's working the front desk there, the bed in the ER, they assign us where to go, or assign us a room. In most of these cases, we go to the back. There's a seclusion room back there, which is away from everybody that's in the general area of the emergency room. So that's where I took her that day.
Is that where you were directed to take her?
Yes.
And you say she had to speak, the defendant was registered at the hospital. Was that common in a OWI investigation blood draw?
Yes.
Okay. Was there any other reason the defendant would have been registered in the hospital that day?
Well, she had some injuries in the crash, specifically her wrist. And I needed to get that attended to before we could ever even think about leaving the hospital.
So you're not just there for a blood draw, but you're there for treatment for the defendant's injury?
Correct.
And you advise the hospital of that?
Yes.
Do you know why Deputy Flint was present also?
I believe Deputy Bowman, Sergeant Bowman wanted another officer there, security reasons, and just to make sure we had two sets of eyes on everything, so everything was all secured.
Is that typical in an OWI blood draw?
Sometimes, but not typically.
So in your 50-plus OWI investigations, have you ever been present for a blood draw before? About how many times?
Probably the majority of those.
So is there a specialized procedure mandated by the state of Michigan and the Michigan State Police in conducting a blood draw for an OWI?
There is.
And how does that procedure start?
So there is paperwork that the hospital gives to me that needs to be filled out. One of them being a consent to draw form. I believe there's another piece of paper as well that I have to fill out there. And then after I do that, that's when I get a Michigan State Police blood kit.
So the initial paperwork you got to fill out, that has nothing to do with the legality of the draw, that's just for the hospital.
Correct, that's just for their own records and mandating.
And the Michigan State Police blood draw kit, what is that?
So it is it's a cardboard box that has a seal on it, like a sticker seal. And on the inside, there's contents of paperwork. There's the actual blood vial tubes that are contained in the box. And then there's a bag for, at the end, that's where the actual tubes that come in the cardboard, they go into that bag, and then everything gets sealed into the box, and then you get another sticker, security sticker that you put on the outside.
So just by naming it a Michigan State Police blood draw kit, that kind of begs the question. But do you know who provides these kits and what their nature is across the state?
So we, as the sheriff's office, we keep our blood kits at the hospital.
In other words, so you get them from the hospital.
Correct.
Do you, the sheriff's department, provide them to the hospital?
Yes.
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 And who provides them to the sheriff's department?
I would guess somebody from command, but I'm not sure.
So, Are these standardized across the state, do you know?
They are, everybody in the state of Michigan uses the same kit.
So you obtain the kit in this instance from the emergency room, from the hospital,
Correct.
and they store them for the sheriff's office there.
Yes.
And that's what you did in this case, is that typical?
Yes.
You don't keep the kits in your car?
We do not.
When you obtained a kit in this case, was the kit sealed?
It was.
Did it appear to be in good order?
It did.
No dents, scratches, holes?
Nothing.
Did it appear typical of the kits you've seen in the past?
Yes.
Once you obtain the kit, well, in fact, this is just a demonstrative exhibit. Show this to you, Deputy. What is that?
This is a Michigan State Police blood kit.
And is that, at least so far, typical of what you would handle in every OWI electronic investigation?
Yes.
And so, once you obtain it from the hospital, what's the first thing you do?
Well, the first step is to open it up. The kits have an integrity seal that's already on it. This is how all kits come. Can I open it?
Sure.
Oh.
As you do that, Deputy, that day, did you break the seal on the kit?
No, Deputy Flint did that day.
Did he do that in your presence?
He did.
Did he open the box or simply cut the seal?
I believe he took the paperwork out and laid it on the table.
Okay. So if you could show the jury then what's inside the kit.
So inside of the kit, sorry, I'm trying to talk to the microphone here and show you. So inside of the kit, this is essentially what it looks like when you open it up. There's a blue piece of paper, it's an insert. It basically tells you the contents of the kit, what's inside of it. There are these two little plastic vials, which are used for urine sample collection. And in my almost 8 years of law enforcement, I've never collected urine on a chemical test. Also inside the box, there are the blood tubes. They come in this little piece of cardboard. About, I don't know if you guys can see that. There's like a little bit of like a powdery type agent in the bottom of the tube. That's essentially to keep the blood fresh. There's 2 tubes. They come like this. The alcohol and drug determination sheet. This is carbon copy paperwork. There's 3 copies. It says on the bottom, the white copy submit with the kit, the yellow copy retained by the agency. Just like this. Sorry, there's 2 copies. Carbon copy. One goes with the kit, one gets retained by the agency.
And that's paperwork you have to fill out on the scene.
Correct.
What else is in the kit?
There are labels for the specimens. So these labels get filled out by me, and then they get affixed to the side of the blood tubes by the phlebotomist after the draw. Also is a iodine prep pad. This is no alcohol. This is what gets used on the site when the phlebotomist does the draw, just so there's no questions about if there's the alcohol used, on that site.
So just to back up to clarify that, so that's an iodine wipe that's included in the kit,
Correct.
and that you give that to the person who does the blood draw, the phlebotomist or the nurse,
Yes, sir.
and so that's so that the requirement is met that when the site is sterilized, there's no alcohol use.
Yes, sir.
What else is in the kit?
There is a plastic bag with a big warning label on it. The reason for the big warning label is, you can see there is a small piece of almost like cloth in the bag. The reason for this being in the bag is if one of these blood tubes breaks while in this bag, this actual piece of cloth will absorb the blood and it can actually still be tested by the lab. So it's important that this actual piece actually gets left in there.
And what's the big warning label?
So the big warning label, it says, important to place blood tube holder containing filled blood tubes along with filled specimen bottles inside Ziploc bag and squeeze out all excess air in closed bag. Note, do not remove liquid absorbing sheet.
Is there any other paperwork in the kit?
There is a shipping seal for when you're done. Box everything back up.
All right. So initially, wait for the box.
All right.
So initially, when you arrive, Deputy Flint opens the kit, begins to unpack the paperwork. So
Correct.
specifically, the blood alcohol determination sheet.
Correct.
And what do you do with the paperwork?
So at that time, I take the paperwork and I start filling it out.
And where are you physically in the hospital as you're doing this?
So we are in the back of the emergency room, in front of the seclusion room.
Okay. And you just have the kit unpacked on a table outside the seclusion room?
Correct.
And so at this point, you're waiting on someone to come do the blood draw.
Yes.
What happens then?
Well, we wait for the phlebotomist to actually come down from upstairs. And at that time, we get moved to one of the actual emergency beds because the nurses and the doctor, they're aware that she actually needs some medical treatment for her wrist and from just the high collision impact of the crash. So we get moved to an emergency room. The phlebotomist meets us at the emergency room and then conducts the blood draw.
Okay. So at some point, you have to pack up the kit and move it to another room.
Correct.
So at that point, the paperwork is filled out and you're just waiting.
Correct.
So you use the demonstrative and you show the jury what's all in the kit, but the specific kit that you have that day, is there any notable differences between it and the one you unpacked here in court today?
No, all the contents were the same.
Okay. Having done dozens of these before, was there anything about that kit that was dissimilar or incongruous to the kits you've seen before?
No, it was the same as any other kit I've seen.
Specifically as to the tubes, did you have an opportunity to inspect those?
I did take a look at them. Came just like this.
Okay. So the tubes appeared intact,
Everything was intact and everything was there.
and they appeared to have the seals intact and the preservatives intact.
Correct.
So you had mentioned about the labels that come to go on the tubes. What at the site is done with those?
So at the site, they're filled out by me, and then I typically allow the phlebotomist to fill in the time, just so all the times are consistent with everything.
And so those tubes, those are just glass tubes, they don't have labels on them?
They do have something on them, but to be honest with you, I don't really know what it means. Just some,
Like a small label? that's
Yeah,
already
just a
fixed?
small, it's got some, medical language on there.
Is that something you can fill out or just something that's already pre-printed?
That's just already on there.
Already pre-printed instructions or warnings or something like that?
Yeah. Potassium fluoride.
Alright. And so,
Sodium fluoride, sorry.
you fill out the labels and affix them?
Correct,
And you did that in this case?
correct.
And what kind of information goes on the label?
The label is, the subject's name, it has the date, it has the name of the person that's actually doing the draw, and it has the officer's name, the time and the date.
So you fill out your portion of it and allow the phlebotomist to complete their portion, their name and the time?
Correct.
And that's what happened in this case?
Yes.
Once the phlebotomist arrived in this case, what did you do with her initially?
Well, provided her with the paperwork and just showed her where I needed her signature or for her to sign.
Does she have her own hospital paperwork?
She does,
And you assisted her with filling that out?
yes.
Because some of that you get a copy of and some of it the hospital gets a copy of?
Correct. Her name needs to go on that paperwork.
So at some point, do you give the tubes from the kit to the phlebotomist?
I do.
And then you stay with her?
Yes,
You stay present during the blood draw? And she conducts her portion of the blood draw?
correct.
Were you able to observe her label the tubes when she completed the draw?
Yes.
What time was the draw completed?
I believe it was shortly after 6:30 that day.
As to the actual draw itself, did you observe anything did you observe anything out of the ordinary from other blood draws you've attended? Debbie, what's a FSD 93?
FSD 93. That'd be the alcohol determination form.
If that's the number at the top, I know what that is.
Yes, that'll be this one.
Okay, so that's the paperwork you fill out and put back in the.
Correct. This goes back in the box. One copy, and the other copy I retain.
Alright. And those are standardized throughout the state of Michigan? Correct. They're provided in every kit?
Yes,
So once the phlebotomist completes the draw, you see her label the tubes. Is that correct?
correct.
Do you see her do anything else as it pertains to the draw of the tubes?
She inverted the tubes multiple times.
And what's the purpose of that?
I believe it has something to do with shaking the sediment that's in the tube before placing it back in the holder.
The cardboard holder?
Correct.
At some point, you receive the tubes back from her,
I do.
and you have an opportunity to inspect them again.
I do.
And they still look in order, no scratches, dents, breaks,
They look the same to me as when I got them
except for the blood inside.
from the blood.
What do you do then with the kit?
And then take the tubes that are packaged just like this, back. They go in the plastic bag that's provided along with that little absorbing sheet. Everything goes back into the kit. The paperwork, iodine pad is already used, so that doesn't go back in.
What about the labels? Are they on the tubes at this point?
They are, they provide 2 sets of labels, and 2 are for urine samples, 2 are for blood samples. And then when everything's back in the kit, when the kit gets closed, and the shipping seal gets affixed to the other side here.
And that's the opposite side of where the initial, you can seal it up for me,
Okay.
And so at this point, it's a little bit after 6:30, you're still at the hospital.
Correct.
This crash was at 3:01.
Correct.
What do you do with the kit for the remainder of the time you're at the hospital?
Hang on to it in my possession.
How much longer were you at the hospital, do you know?
I believe until shortly after 9 p.m.
Why so long?
Well, the defendant needed to get medical attention on her wrist. She also got x-rays on her head and neck. She got her wrist set a few different times, so it took a while for all that to happen before we could get discharged from the hospital.
And you eventually got discharged a little after 9 p.m.
Correct.
At that point, you proceed to the sheriff's office,
I did.
and defendant's handed off to some other deputy, is that correct?
Correct.
Are you still in possession of the blood kit at that time?
I am.
What's the sheriff's department policy for those, once you get back to the office with one?
So these blood kits get placed into an evidence locker at the sheriff's office, just like any other piece of evidence. There's a wall at the sheriff's office. There's approximately 40 or so evidence lockers. You put the piece of property in there, you close the door. There's a key that's already sticking out of the locker, so you know that locker's open. You can put something in there. I close it, turn the key, and then there's a key slot, and the only person that has access at that time would be who's in charge of our evidence. So it would have been the detective department at that time.
Okay. And you did that all with this blood kit?
Correct.
Do you know about what time you would have done that?
I'm not entirely sure.
What time did you leave for the night after a long shift?
Somewhere around 10 or 11, somewhere around there.
So is it fair to say you would have put this in the evidence locker close to immediately after getting back to the sheriff's office?
Yes, as soon as I got there, the defendant was handed off to another deputy. I then proceeded to park the vehicle, go upstairs, place the kit in evidence, and then start on my paperwork.
Okay. Deputy, are you assigned a body worn camera?
I am.
And was that active that day, on April 20th, 2024?
There was.
And was all of this that we've talked about recorded on the body worn?
There was.
Were there any exceptions to the quality or nature of the video?
Yes, at some points the video wasn't muted, but it was still on.
Okay, why was it muted?
There were times during the course of this incident where I was talking to other officers and the camera was muted. It's a mistake of my own. I should have been audio recording the entire time, but it doesn't take away from the fact that the whole incident was recorded with video.
Okay. At some point, do you, later on in the video, do you zip up your coat over the video?
Yes.
Okay. And that's toward the end of the video, it would probably pass 8 o'clock.
Yes, that's probably somewhere around the medical treatment portion.
Okay. So, Judge, we've broken up Deputy Schmidt's body camera into 4 parts, both for time concerns, relevance, and other issues surrounding a disability. Exhibit 6A is Deputy Schmidt's time at the scene. 6D, we believe right now is inadmissible, but may become admissible later. And 6C and D document the blood draw. So at this time, I would just move the proper 6D.
Objection to that?
But have A, C, and D.
Proper, not admitted, but proper, so we can watch it.
Yes, that's what he said.
But I'm also going to move to admit A and C without claim. They're as I described, but I don't think it has a lot of value in the midst of trial.
No objection.
All right, A and C are admitted. D may be shown. Thank you.
You already verbally before we tell the patient what we're doing?
That we're drawing blood? Yeah. What was your last name? M-U-N-D-Y. Perfect. Thank you.
Technically, I guess, is that what I'm signing?
Yeah. I guess you'll just have to sign your name and the time and draw the blood. Whatever time you got, just for those. Yeah. Her name goes in there, right? Her name goes right here. The person on the account. Correct.
Permission.
Yeah.
Who was, signature? I'm assuming?
No, I think that's the name of the person who's on the account. I was just asking to confirm, is that a form you're
I
student?
don't know, this is
Yeah, that right.
Is it CHIDESTER?
Yes. And then this is the, yeah, that's her. Sorry. Oh, yeah. It should be on the table. What's that? Yeah.
Let me go see. Nothing was rushing you, did he?
Nah, it's, yeah, sorry.
No, no. Back to back to back, you know,
What was your first name?
Well,
Ron. I'm Steve, nice to meet you. I thought I had met you before. I tried to stay out of here.
me too, here I am, right?
Here you are, won't come anywhere.
We have nobody, so I come in and I can use the chaos. Nobody seems to
I feel like I'm kind of just in the middle.
Yeah, okay, that's it.
Oh, good. It's good to hear. That's good to hear. What's that? We're looking for it. Who's the doc right now? Let me see which one is longer charges. Just so you know, she's just going to use an iodine swab, just no alcohol or anything. I hate getting my blood around.
You said what?
I hate getting my blood around. I can't look. No, I can't even look. How are you doing? You look tired. What are your dead body looking?
I kind of messed it up though.
Can you? Okay, it's just you then.
No, it's just my preference. It's the last 2 weeks of my semester as well, so some problems are coming up.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Yep. Yeah.
the doctor in charge of the unit would have been at that time.
Is that because you have to put the supervising position into your paperwork?
Yes, that needs to go on the search warrant.
And all that, as well as the other portions of your body camera, those are fair and accurate representations of what you saw that day?
Yes,
You had an opportunity to review them
I did.
and review their edits that have been being submitted in court today.
Yes.
Move for admission of A, C, and D.
A and C have already been admitted. As to D, both of them. Pupil 6D is admitted.
And I just note that the foundation for 6B is laid, should it become admissible without recalling that issue.
Okay.
No further questions.
Cross.
My license will go out to the medical professional. Deputy, it's detective, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's all right.
I need to go close, I represent. That's your work.
Yes.
We met before, that June 27th of last year, before Judge Brown, during the preliminary examination, correct?
Correct.
And I asked you at that time, if you shook, you shaken the vials of blood with the preservative that's at the bottom, I believe you described as white powder. And your answer, would you agree, was you never shook them?
Correct.
And we noted in one of the reports or whatever, checklists that are given to you fill out. You fill out the checklist with regard to the boxes, the draw, or did somebody else fill those out? Did you fill out any forms at all concerning the blood?
Yes, the hospital forms and,
And then you signed it as the officer in charge of that. Is that correct?
I probably did.
All right. And are you aware that these vials of blood, that white powdery substance is a preservative to preserve, so it will then ferment the water?
As far as what I know, I'm not a medical professional, but I can agree to that.
And thank you for being honest.
You're welcome.
I'm not a doctor, so it's your understanding that there's a preservative in there, and it's got to be shaken, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever see, because I just watched the videotape, that's why I got out my eyes right to last, to look you close. Did you ever see anybody, you did, you said, did you see anybody shake it like this?
The phlebotomist inverted on,
And you used the word invert, that she took them and she inverted, correct? That's what it showed, at least I could
correct,
see.
she took them completely upside down.
It looked like there wasn't multiple times. Would you agree with that?
Well, she did directly after and then before putting them back in the,
Did it look like before she put them away that she turned like this and was putting them?
possibly.
I know you're not a medical person, but you like to follow procedure, correct?
Correct.
And the procedure you took part in is giving the blood draw, preserving, and then having it sent to the Michigan State Police toxicology lab, correct?
Correct.
Now, would you agree that if the preservative is not properly mixed, that would cause fermentation?
Objection.
Anything else?
Deputy Schmidt's not qualified to answer that.
I'll withdraw. Thank you. Now, while you're at the hospital, before you went to the hospital with my client, where was she for those about 3.5 hours?
From the time, from when we left the scene until like the hospital, you mean?
Did Did you stop at the police station or sheriff's station at all? Did you go straight from the scene at Monroe Club to the hospital?
All the scenes in the hospital.
Okay. And how long were you at the hospital with Marshall Richards?
A long time.
Would you say at least 2 hours or 3 hours?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Did you
Yes.
mark when you arrived at the hospital?
It's our protocol whenever we leave somewhere, we tell dispatch, or we arrive somewhere, we tell dispatch.
But there was none of the documents. It's okay. You didn't mark down anywhere on the documents, or there's nowhere to mark on the
No,
documents.
I did not mark anywhere.
Why did it take so long to get this blood draw that we watched a few minutes ago?
So, obviously went back to the scene, after she was in custody. First off, I wanted to make sure that all my fellow officers that were on scene, all the medical personnel were taken care of, they didn't need any help, and I could leave.
No, I'm sorry. What I meant was, once you got to the hospital, you were at the hospital for 2-3 hours.
Correct.
Okay, why didn't you get a blood test right then and there when you did that?
So, I needed to fill out the paperwork for the search warrant.
You did that while you were at the hospital?
Yes. I was seated in my vehicle.
I just, of course, we were there, so that's why I'm asking so many questions, trying to put this back together. We would reply those 2-3 hours. I'm looking at a short tape, and it looks like that's when you just walked right in.
No, we were there for a few hours.
Okay, all right, both in your patrol car and then inside the hospital.
Yes, sir.
And was my client getting any treatment for foot or arm injuries?
She did, after the blood draw was completed.
At the hospital, right?
Correct.
Now, after you arrived and you were going to get to the hospital and start filling out the paperwork or the search warrant paperwork, affidavit and so forth, why didn't you go back to the sheriff's office and do, commonly known as, or formerly known as, master breathalyzer that you usually do for people suspected of crime? Why wouldn't you take her for that too?
For this case, with the serious injuries that were potentially had there, my client wanted to make sure that we did a blood draw.
Okay. But why wouldn't you do a breathalyzer? Would you say you do breathalyzer about 90% of the time? Are people suspicious of predictive driving?
No, a majority of my chemical tests are in blood.
Okay. Is it because people refuse the breathalyzer?
Sometimes they refuse, sometimes they're not compliant. There's variable circumstances that it could be.
But if you read that, you said DI 177, am I correct?
Correct.
If you read that, it says, take a breathalyzer, urine test, or blood test, or else you may, or you will lose your license. Is that correct? Well, that's
Correct.
right to read.
Somewhere.
In a synopsis.
In a synopsis.
All right. And you read that to her?
Correct.
And she said, yes, I'll take whatever test, whatever you wanted her to do?
Yes.
Okay. So you didn't file a secretary state refusal or any of that stuff?
No.
She was very cooperative, correct?
Yes, she was
And
cooperative.
she was understanding what you were asking her to say to her, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so again, why wouldn't you take her first for the breathalyzer that involved into the case, 2 samples? And then take her for blood? I don't know if he fully answered it, Judge. I'm just going to ask you.
I'm gonna sustain the objection. He did answer. He said the policy of fatalities was to take a blood test.
Now, after you received the blood, and you put it in this, what do you call that?
Just gonna say police blood kit.
blood kit, all right, once you put it back in the blood kit box, did you refrigerate it?
No.
Do you, now this camera that's, muted, it wasn't muted during the last film that we watched, correct?
I think there might have been parts where it was at points.
Was it muted at the time you were at the scene?
It was.
Why would you, mute your, body camera?
At that time, I was having some conversations with other officers.
And you didn't want anyone to know?
Objection, I don't think he finished the
Oh, I'm
answer.
sorry, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Judge.
I was having private conversations with other officers at the scene.
And you didn't want anybody to hear what those private conversations were, correct?
Well, there's no policy against muting our cameras.
Oh, so there's no policy with the Monroe County Sheriff that you can mute or shut off your camera anytime you want?
Not shut off. While we're still having citizen contact, we still have to have our cameras on.
So you can mute anytime you feel is proper, or anytime that you want to mute it, you can mute it.
A camera can be muted, yes. But it still stays on.
The camera still stays on, but it's muted.
Correct.
And how do you mute on this body?
There's a button on the side that you hold down and it mutes it.
So it's something of an intentional act.
Yes.
When you were, at the time that this took place, that you were investigating, were you an officer, was it 7 or 8 years?
Just under 8 years. My 8-year mark will be May of this year.
And you were, an officer for 5 years in the city of Riverview?
No, about 8 to 9 months at the city of Riverview.
And that was, during your probation period of time, 12 months?
Correct.
And is there any reason why, you, left or were terminated after 9 months?
No, actually, I left on my own accord there.
And was that an agreement that you would, sign papers that you were leaving on your own?
Yes.
Now, as to these sobriety tests that you spoke of earlier, there's the national highway ones, correct, that are approved, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar at all with any law or court of appeal laws that says that the dexterity test, the finger pencil test in front of the eye, is not as accurate?
Objection, calls for the
Oh,
legal
that's right.
opinion. It's
Oh,
a
that's
question,
right.
it's a test that he didn't testify that he gave.
You gave the alphabet test, correct?
Correct.
And the purpose of the alphabet test to see is somebody, their sobriety and level of sobriety, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And my client completed the alphabet test completely, clearly, understandably, with no problem, correct?
Correct.
And you know that in the report, correct?
Correct.
And was your camera on to record, excuse me, was the voice on or was it muted at that time?
It was on. It was muted at that time.
It was what?
It was muted at that time.
The video was on, but it was muted, correct? So any documentation to back up that you completed the alphabet, we don't have that other than your testimony, correct?
Correct. And I
Okay. Now, the numbers. Did you ask her, my client, to count from 1 to 100?
no.
you asked her to count backwards from 100, was it to 88? Is that a yes?
Yes, sorry.
And you said the first time she counted 100 to what?
91.
And could you understand her?
At that time, yes.
Okay, she wasn't swearing, correct?
Had that I recall.
Okay. And that would be something you put down in a report as a trained officer, correct? Observations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I presume your report is honest, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And now, you knew that my client was just involved in a major collision, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you knew from investigating when you got there that my client went through the wall and went about 25 feet into the location of the Swan Boat Club, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you think that would shake anybody up a little bit?
Objection calls for speculation.
Response?
Have you, I'll ask, I'll withdraw that and then lay it on the
Okay.
Thank you. You've investigated many accidents, correct?
Correct.
As a patrol officer, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've investigated major collisions, I presume, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And after somebody, in your experience, after somebody has been in a major collision or mid-collision or major, do they seem shaken up at all?
Yes, at times it did.
Do you consider this a major collision? Now, you said that you didn't give my client the one length scan test. Is that when you asked somebody that you're investigating to raise their one leg off the ground, maybe 5-6 inches, and hold it and count maybe 1,000, 2,000 to 9 or 10?
Correct. It's up to 30, but it's the same.
And so then you say keep counting until it's right side.
Correct.
And you didn't give that based upon her neuropathy?
Correct. I just didn't feel she was safe to be able to complete that test without potentially falling or hurting herself.
You have no proof that my client doesn't have neuropathy, correct?
Objection. It's a double negative. You can
Well-
ask that question directly. What's a double
Oh,
negative?
thank you, Judge. Do you have any proof that she has neuropathy?
At that time,
Yes.
at that time, I did not.
Do you now believe she has neuropathy?
I haven't seen her since. I don't know.
Have you seen her walk? Okay.
Today, I have not seen her walk.
Now, the walk and turn. Is that when you ask a person that you're investigating, believing they may have consumed alcohol, to put their heel to the front of their toe, their shoe, and walk like that, one behind the other, for 9 steps?
Correct.
Okay. And then you ask them to turn around and then do 9 steps back, correct?
Yes. To take a small series of steps and get themselves turned around and then 9 back towards the start.
Okay. And you didn't ask my client to take that because of her safety, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't want her to fall down, correct?
Correct.
And she was able to understand all of your directions, correct?
Yes.
She told you what her name was, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did she or did you know that she was a former commodore of the boat club?
I have no idea.
Now, when you took her to the hospital, was she unruly in your car at all?
No.
Do you have cameras that sort of flip around and record somebody in the back?
Unfortunately, our county police cars, we don't have in-vehicle cameras.
You don't have dash cams?
No. We just have body cameras that are affixed to us.
So she was not unruly in the backseat of the car, correct, while you were transporting her?
She was cooperative.
Okay. She was making a lot of noise, screaming, yelling, none of that craziness, right?
No.
asleep in the backseat?
I don't recall.
Okay, was she vomiting in the backseat?
No,
Did she vomit in the hospital?
no,
You had mentioned that earlier, I was asking about it. Did she urinate on herself in the patrol car?
no,
And you said that's the one other thing that you looked at is vomiting, urination on her clothes or in her clothes.
absolutely.
And the higher the alleged blood alcohol content is, the more people do these things. Would you agree? So this urinate, their bodily control is not there.
Well, I think everybody has their own alcohol tolerance, up to a point.
But would you agree from all of your arrests that you've done or investigations, that usually urination, vomiting, it occurs when somebody's ingested a lot of alcohol than just a little bit?
Yes,
How long did it take you to obtain a search warrant from the time you arrived and put her in the backseat of the car?
I don't recall the exact amount of time.
Okay. In your past history as a patrol officer, when you pull somebody over of suspicion of drunk driving and you want to get a search warrant done, are they usually done like within an hour?
Yeah, I would say for the most part that's pretty accurate.
And this was 6:30 in the evening, early, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the magistrate or judge is usually at home and it's sent to him or her, correct?
Correct.
And then they review it, they sign it, and then they send it back to you,
Correct, the email.
and then you give it to the hospital.
Yes.
And sometimes that's done within, would you say 45 minutes, an hour?
Yeah, sometimes that's about right.
Is some of the statements in the affidavit sort of fill in the blank?
Yes.
When you approached my client inside the vehicle, did you see a cane that she uses for walking?
I don't recall.
Do you know if the airbags went off?
I don't recall.
Do you think airbags that go off or a collision into a wall, in your experience of patrol officer investigating accidents, do you think that running into a wall and going 25 feet is our ability that type of a collision? Sometimes people don't have all their faculties immediately afterwards.
Objection, calls for speculation.
In his history, Your Honor, he's investigated accidents.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, when you arrived at the scene, it was some confusion going on. You agree? I mean, we saw tapes earlier yesterday. It looked, I don't mean to use the word craziness, but it was crazy what was going on, right? I mean, there were tables all over, there's a vehicle inside, people are injured, 2 little children are severely injured or critically injured. It was chaos
It was the most chaotic scene in my almost 8-year career.
of your career. And I'm sorry you didn't go through that, you were involved in it. So, do you agree that the containers, were those little like red Solo cups that they serve, or did they serve something else with those? In other words, were there any containers that looked like at one time they had fluid in it, and they're all over the place, food's everywhere, there's containers to drink.
Sorry. Are you
Judge,
talking
I'm
about-
sorry, one is a city facts, not an evidence. I don't know what Mr. Close is talking about.
Judge,
Hang on.
I would draw.
Objection.
I was gonna say, I
You're
would
gonna
draw.
withdraw it?
Okay.
On you go.
All right, thank you. When you arrived on the scene of the swine cold, it was shortly after 3 o'clock, correct?
Correct.
On April 20th, 24.
Correct.
Was everything in disarray?
From what I saw, yes.
You just talked about, it's probably the most horrific
Yes.
scenes.
Correct.
And was there food and cups all over?
So I never actually made it into the bar area.
How about where the tables were?
I don't even recall when the tables were in that building.
Because it was so chaotic or so messy, for lack of a better word. And I'm just going by what the prosecutor showed some tapes yesterday and trying to refresh or, talk about it verbally. Did you ask the hospital while you were there with this blood kit, to take additional blood from my client and have it tested by the hospital?
No, I did not.
And then, what was the date that this kit expires?
I do not recall.
So you don't know if it was expired or not, correct?
Well, if the hospital had it there, then it would have been up to date.
Based upon the hospital has it there, so if they do no wrong, it's got to be up to date. Is that correct?
No, that's not.
Objection, calls for speculation.
Well,
It's
because-
not connected.
I think he testified he doesn't know, so that answers the question.
I don't have any other questions, Judge.
Very well.
Thank you, officer.
Redirect, sir.
Thank you, Judge.
So, Deb, I'm going to show you this form. This is just another FSD 93, like the one you packed into the kit. Is that identical to the same type of form?
Yes, this is the exact same form.
Okay. So that's a carbon pack, but it's also a two-sided form, is that right?
Correct.
So on the front is information you fill out. What's on the back?
So the back is the form instructions for the FSD 093, which is this one.
Okay. And toward the middle of the page, it says guidelines.
Yes.
And it says
Objection, Your Honor. This isn't part of the original examination, right? He's going outside. He's already had his chance to ask these questions.
Response.
This is in response to Mr. Clovis's going down the road. Did you shake the bodies?
All right, I'll accept it. I'll accept it.
So there's instructions that are titled to the medical professional physician. Is that right?
Correct.
Do any of those pertain to what to do with the preservative in the bodies?
Yes.
Which one? I believe it's number 2 or 3.
So 2 is struck 2 tubes of venous blood from subject in presence of a law enforcement officer until the subject in the officer's presence that no alcohol was used in sterilizing the skin surface, needle, or syringe.
And what about the next one?
3 is slowly invert blood sample tubes enough times to distribute the sodium fluoride, potassium oxalate preservative.
And that's the instructions for that on the state form, is that right? Correct. So it's not shake the tube 3 times, or you're ordered to shake the tube, or there's any statute that requires you to do that, right?
No.
I'm sorry, the mic.
I'm really sorry, but Mike is, no.
Okay. And then that's not something you would do anyway, that's something with the bodies.
Correct. I've never done that once on a OWI blood draw.
Okay. And you saw the phlebotomist do it in this case.
Yes.
So you're satisfied with the guidelines on the back of that form were compliant?
Objection, Your Honor. That's for the jury.
No, it's not a legal conclusion or a factual conclusion. It's he has to make sure those guidelines are complied with before he leaves the hospital.
I think the question is he satisfied? I'll overrule the objection and take the answer whether he's satisfied.
I was satisfied with the conclusion of that.
Thank you. So as to the timelines Mr. Clovis was getting into, once you arrive at the hospital and check in, do you have any authority over those folks?
No,
Is it fair to say that you were at the mercy of the hospital as to when that draw gets included?
yes,
Were you that bad?
yes,
Mr. Clovis asked you if you asked for the hospital to draw her blood and independently test it for you. Have you ever done that in your 9-year career?
no, not in my 8-year career, I have not.
Okay. Do you know if the hospital will do that for you?
I don't know.
Do you know of any officer who has ever asked the hospital to do that and had it be successful?
Objection is irrelevancy what other officers do.
I'm gonna sustain that.
Fair enough. As to your body camera deputy, throughout the course of the day, you muted and unmuted this thing you testified to. Is that right?
Yes,
And I think you indicated under cross-exam with Mr. Clovis that that was to have private conversations. Is that correct?
yes.
When you say that, what generally do you mean by a private conversation?
Well, in terms of that scene there, more or less trying to figure out from the other officers what I need to do, what they're currently doing, things that I don't believe are necessarily relevant to public treatment.
And so those are more, so what you're saying is those are more, not administrative, but course of conduct type of conversations with fellow officers.
Correct.
So when you say private conversation, you're not talking about each other's significant others at the scene.
No, we're talking about the scene and what needs to be done and where we're at with it.
Mr. Clovis asked you if in a crash like that, you think somebody would get quote unquote shaken up by the crash. Did the defendant appear shaken up to the crash, shaken up by the crash to you?
Besides the injuries that she sustained, there was no other indication that she was shaken up in the crash.
Mr. Clovis also asked you as to the sobriety testing and things like that, if the defendant followed all of your instructions. As to the horizontal gaze and stagnance, did she follow all of your instructions?
She was not able to focus on my stimuli, which is part of the instructions.
Okay. Did she turn her head to attempt to follow your finger?
Yes,
Is that part of the instructions?
yes,
Did she follow that part?
no,
No further redirect question.
Now, you stated earlier, officer, that my client had a test, was it a CAT scan?
Objection? No, he didn't.
Okay. That she came in for head injuries at all?
Right.
Mention that?
yes,
Of that? And then you asked her to do what type of test, and she wasn't able to follow. What type of test was that?
an eye test,
Right. And she wasn't able to totally focus clearly after the accident, correct?
she was
Do that
not,
test?
I'm sorry, what?
To do that test, she wasn't able to clearly focus to do that test right after the accident.
Objection calls for speculation.
Was she able to do it?
That's a fair question, go ahead.
She wasn't able to complete the test.
They just wouldn't
People are
speak.
satisfied, you can step down, we ask that his subpoena is still active.
Okay.
You can call for.
All right. which means you cannot stay in court. You're all set.
I also asked, the detective to bring the kid to me. Also,
Yes.
yes, that's what we will.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our morning break. I'm going to ask that you follow Deputy Huff, go to the jury room. We'll be back on the record at